The sack of flour weighed almost nothing in Natalie Turner's arms, but she clutched it like precious gold as she hurried through the dusty streets of Las Lunas, New Mexico territory, her worn boots kicking up small clouds with each step. It was the summer of 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on her faded calico dress, the same dress she had worn nearly every day for the past 3 years. Mended so many times the original fabric was hard to distinguish from the patches. She kept her eyes down as she walked, knowing that if she looked up, she might catch sight of something beautiful in one of the shop windows, and that would only make the ache in her chest grow stronger. Natalie had learned young that beauty was not for girls like her. At 20 years old, she had never owned a piece of jewelry, never worn a ribbon in her mousy brown hair that was not already frayed beyond recognition, never held anything in her hands that made her heart sing just to look at it. Her mother had died when she was 7, leaving her father to raise 3 children alone on a failing homestead. When her father passed 2 years ago, Natalie had been left to care for her younger siblings, 12-year-old Thomas and 14-year-old Mary, working as a laundress and occasional cook to keep them fed. The bag of flour had cost her nearly a week's wages, but it would keep them eating for at least 2 weeks if she was careful. She allowed herself a small smile as she turned down the narrow alley that led to the tiny shack they called home, tucked behind the general store where the rent was cheap because no one else wanted to live in a place where the walls let in both wind and rain. Miss Turner. The voice made her jump, and she nearly dropped the flour. She spun around to find Sheriff Morrison standing at the mouth of the alley, his weathered face grave. Her stomach dropped. The sheriff never brought good news. "Yes, sir. I need to speak with you about your brother, Thomas." Her heart hammered in her chest. What has he done? He was caught stealing from the Hanson place, some dried beef and a few coins. Mr. Hanson wants to press charges. The world seemed to tilt beneath Natalie's feet. She knew Thomas had been hungry. She knew the portions she had been giving him were not enough for a growing boy. But stealing, that could mean jail time or worse, they could all be thrown out of town. "Please," she heard herself saying, though her voice sounded distant and strange. "Please, Sheriff Morrison, I will pay Mr. Hanson back, every cent. I will work extra hours. I will do anything. Thomas is a good boy. He is just hungry, and I have not been able to provide enough, and it is my fault, not his." The sheriff's expression softened slightly. "I believe you, Miss Turner, and I do not doubt Thomas is a good kid at heart. But the law is the law. I have got him at the jail now. Mr. Hanson has agreed not to press charges if you can pay him back the value of what was taken, plus a fine. That comes to about $15. $15. Natalie felt the blood drain from her face. She had exactly $1.30 to her name, and that was after buying the flour. It might as well have been $1,500. "I do not have that kind of money," she whispered. "I figured as much. I am sorry, Miss Turner. I will hold off taking him to the territorial judge for a few days, give you time to see what you can do. But if you cannot come up with the money, I will have no choice." After the sheriff left, Natalie sank down against the rough wooden wall of the alley, still clutching the flour. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears solved nothing. Instead, she tried to think, tried to find some solution in the tangle of impossible problems that seemed to make up her entire life. She could ask for charity, but she had already borrowed from everyone she knew. She could sell what little they owned, but they owned nothing of value. Their few cooking pots, the thin blankets, her mother's old Bible with the cracked spine, none of it would bring more than a few cents. The sound of boots on packed earth made her look up. A man stood at the entrance to the alley, but he was not like any man she had seen in Las Lunas before. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. His hair fell past his shoulders in dark waves, and a thick beard covered much of his face, but she could see his eyes, surprisingly gentle despite his intimidating size. He wore buckskin clothing that marked him as a mountain man, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had spent more time in the wilderness than in towns. "Pardon me, miss." His voice was deep and rough, like rocks tumbling in a stream. "I did not mean to intrude. I was looking for the boarding house and seemed to have taken a wrong turn." Natalie scrambled to her feet, brushing dust from her skirt. "You are going the wrong way. The boarding house is on Main Street, back the way you came, then left at the church." He nodded his thanks but did not move, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Are you all right? You look troubled." "I am fine, thank you." The automatic response came easily. She had spent years telling people she was fine when she was anything but. "Forgive me for being forward, but you do not look fine. You look like someone carrying the weight of the world." There was something in his tone, not pity exactly, but understanding, as if he knew what it was like to carry burdens too heavy to bear. Despite herself, Natalie felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "My brother is in trouble," she found herself saying. "He stole some food because he was hungry, and now I owe $15 to keep him out of real trouble, and I do not have it. I do not have any way to get it." The man was quiet for a moment, then he reached into a leather pouch at his belt. When he extended his hand toward her, she saw the glint of gold coins in his palm. "No," she said immediately, taking a step back. "I cannot take your money. I do not even know you." "My name is Colton Prescott," he said. "Now you know me. And this is not charity if that is what worries you. I have a proposition." Natalie's wariness increased. She had heard about propositions before, the kind men made to desperate women. "What kind of proposition?" "Nothing improper," Colton said quickly, as if reading her thoughts. "I have been living in the mountains for the past 8 years, trapping and trading. I have done well for myself, but I have grown tired of being alone. I came to town looking for someone to keep house for me, someone to cook and mend and help me prepare my furs for trading. I will pay good wages, provide room and board. You could bring your siblings with you. My cabin is large enough." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Why would you offer this to a complete stranger in an alley?" "Because I recognize the look in your eyes," Colton said quietly. "I lost my own family when I was young. My parents and 2 sisters. Fever took them all in the span of a week. I was 17 and alone in the world. I know what it is like to be desperate, to feel like you are drowning and no one will throw you a rope. I am throwing you a rope, Miss Turner. You do not have to take it, but the offer is genuine." Natalie studied his face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. All she saw was an earnest sincerity that made her want to trust him, despite every instinct telling her to be cautious. "You would pay me wages?" she asked slowly. $20 a month, plus room and board for you and your siblings. I will give you the $15 now to settle your brother's debt, as an advance on your wages. $20 a month. It was more than she made now, even with all her various jobs combined. And room and board meant no more worrying about rent, no more stretching food to the point of near starvation. "Where is this cabin?" "About 2 days' ride north, up in the Manzano Mountains. It is remote, I will not lie about that. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. But it is safe, well built, warm in winter and cool in summer, and the country up there is beautiful beyond description." Beautiful. The word caught at something inside her. "I have never seen beautiful country," she said before she could stop herself. "I have never seen much of anything except dirt and dust and struggle. Something shifted in Colton's expression, a tenderness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Then maybe it is time you did." She made her decision in that moment, reckless though it might be. "All right. I will work for you, Mr. Prescott. When do we leave?" "Call me Colton. And we can leave as soon as you are ready, but take your time. A day or two to settle your affairs here, say your goodbyes." He pressed the gold coins into her hand, and she felt their weight, solid and real. Enough to save Thomas. Enough to give them all a chance at something better. That evening, after she had paid Mr. Hanson and secured Thomas's release, after she had explained to her siblings that they were leaving Las Lunas for a new life in the mountains, Natalie lay awake on her thin pallet and wondered what she had gotten them into. Colton Prescott seemed kind, but she had been fooled by seeming kindness before. Still, what choice did she have? Stay here and watch her family slowly starve, watch Thomas get into worse and worse trouble. At least this way they had a chance. 2 days later, they set out just after dawn. Colton had provided horses for all of them, gentle mares that even Mary, who had never ridden much, could handle. He loaded their few possessions onto a pack mule along with the supplies he had purchased in town, and then they were moving through the streets of Las Lunas as the town began to wake. Natalie looked back only once, at the narrow alley and the shack that had been the only home she had known for 2 years. She felt no sadness at leaving it behind. There was nothing there worth mourning. The ride north was unlike anything Natalie had experienced. She had left Las Lunas only a handful of times in her life, and never for more than a few miles. Now they traveled through landscape that shifted and changed with each passing hour. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills covered in scrub brush and juniper. The heat of the valley was replaced by cooler air as they climbed in elevation. By the time they made camp the first night, Natalie could see mountains rising in the distance, their peaks touched with the gold of the setting sun. Colton proved to be a considerate traveling companion. He set up camp with practiced efficiency, building a fire and preparing a meal of beans and salt pork that was simple but more filling than anything Natalie had managed to cook in months. He was good with Thomas and Mary too, answering the boys' endless questions about trapping and wilderness survival with patience, and treating Mary with a gentle courtesy that made her smile. As they sat around the fire after dinner, Thomas pestered Colton for stories about his years in the mountains. Colton obliged, telling tales of harsh winters and close calls with bears, of pristine lakes hidden in valleys where no man had ever walked, of the profound silence that came with being truly alone in the wilderness. "You ever get lonely?" Mary asked shyly. "Sometimes," Colton admitted. "Especially in the winter when the snow is deep, and you might not see another soul for months. It is one of the reasons I decided it was time to have people around again. A man can only talk to himself for so long before he starts to worry about his sanity." Thomas laughed, but Natalie studied Colton's face in the firelight. There was a loneliness in him, she realized, a depth of isolation that went beyond merely lacking company. It was the loneliness of someone who had lost everything that mattered and had never quite figured out how to build a new life in the ruins. She understood that loneliness intimately. The next day, they climbed higher into the mountains, following trails that seemed to exist only in Colton's memory. The terrain grew rougher, the vegetation denser. Pine trees replaced juniper, their scent sharp and clean in the air. Natalie found herself constantly staring at her surroundings, overwhelmed by the sheer scale and wildness of it all. Everything was so green, so alive. She had not realized how much she had been starved for color until now. "It is something, is it not?" Colton said, riding up beside her. He had been leading the way but had dropped back to check on them periodically throughout the day. I had no idea places like this existed, Natalie admitted. It is like another world. Wait until you see the cabin, Colton said, and there was unmistakable pride in his voice. I built it myself over the course of 2 summers. It sits in a meadow with a creek running through it. You can see for miles in every direction, but you are protected by the mountains on 3 sides. It is the most peaceful place I have ever known. They reached the cabin late in the afternoon of the 2nd day. Colton had not exaggerated. The structure sat in the middle of a wide meadow dotted with wildflowers, a sturdy building of logs chinked with mud and moss. Smoke rose from a stone chimney, and Natalie realized with surprise that someone must have been maintaining it in Colton's absence. "My neighbor, Frank, looks after the place when I am gone," Colton explained, seeing her expression. "Good man. Keeps the fire going so it does not get too cold inside, makes sure no animals have gotten in. His own place is about 5 miles west." The inside of the cabin was even more impressive than the outside. It was one large room divided into areas by strategic furniture placement. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a cooking area beside it that included an actual iron stove. There were 2 beds along the far wall, both covered with thick furs that looked incredibly soft. A large wooden table with benches sat in the middle of the room, and shelves lined the walls, filled with supplies and equipment. Everything was neat and well organized, the work of someone who valued order in his surroundings. "Thomas and Mary can share that bed there," Colton said, pointing to the larger of the 2. "You can have the other one. I will string up a curtain for privacy. I usually sleep outside when the weather is good, or I can make a bedroll by the fire." Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had not thought about the sleeping arrangements, about the impropriety of living in such close quarters with a man who was not her husband. But what choice did they have? And Colton seemed determined to maintain propriety as much as possible. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. Natalie threw herself into her work with the same determination she had always brought to surviving. She cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, cooked meals that made use of the surprising variety of supplies Colton had stockpiled, mended his clothes and organized his furs. Colton spent his days checking his trap lines and hunting, always returning before dark with fresh meat or fish from the creek. Thomas and Mary thrived in the mountain air. Thomas followed Colton around like a shadow whenever he was allowed, learning to track and hunt and read the signs of the forest. Mary helped Natalie with the household tasks, but also spent hours exploring the meadow, returning with bouquets of wildflowers that she arranged in tin cups around the cabin. It was during one of these flower arranging sessions that Natalie realized something had shifted inside her. She was watching Mary hum while she worked, her face peaceful and content in a way it had not been for years, and Natalie felt something unlock in her chest. They were safe here, fed, warm. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not have to worry about where their next meal would come from or whether they would have a roof over their heads tomorrow. "You look happy," Colton said, and Natalie startled. She had not heard him come in. "I suppose I am," she said slowly, testing the truth of the words. "Or at least, I am not unhappy, which is novel enough." Colton set down the rabbit he had been carrying and moved to the wash basin to clean his hands. "You deserve happiness, Natalie. You and your brother and sister. You have all worked hard enough for it." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about the intimacy of it made her pulse quicken. Over the past week, she had found herself watching Colton more than she should. Noticing the way his muscles moved under his shirt when he split wood, the gentleness in his hands when he showed Thomas how to set a snare. the faraway look in his eyes sometimes when he thought no one was watching, as if he were remembering things that brought him both joy and pain. He was handsome beneath the beard and the rough exterior, she had realized. More than that, he was kind. Genuinely, deeply kind in a way that seemed to come from his core rather than from any expectation of reward. In a life that had contained precious little kindness, that quality shone like gold. "Can I ask you something?" she said before she could lose her nerve, of course. "Why did you really offer to help us? The truth." Colton was quiet for a long moment, drying his hands on a cloth. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I told you I lost my family when I was 17. What I did not tell you was that after they died, I had nowhere to go. No money, no prospects. I was going to steal some food from a general store, desperate enough that I did not care about the consequences. But the store owner caught me. Instead of turning me in, he gave me a job. Gave me a chance to earn my way instead of ending up in jail or worse. He saved my life, that old man. I have always wanted to pay that kindness forward, but living alone in the mountains does not provide many opportunities. When I saw you in that alley, looking exactly how I must have looked all those years ago, I knew it was my chance." Natalie felt her throat tighten with emotion. "That is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." "Then people have not been kind enough to you," Colton said simply. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Natalie could not quite name. Then Mary came bursting through the door with another armful of flowers, and the spell was broken. As summer deepened into early fall, Natalie found herself falling into a rhythm of life she had never imagined possible. The work was hard, certainly, but it was satisfying in a way her previous endless struggle for survival had never been. When she cooked a meal, she had good ingredients to work with. When she mended clothes, she had proper thread and needles. The constant, gnawing anxiety that had been her companion for years began to fade, replaced by something she barely recognized as contentment. Colton was away more often now, checking his trap lines in preparation for winter, making sure everything was secure before the snows came. But when he was home, Natalie found herself hyper-aware of his presence. The way he smiled at something Thomas said. The care he took to wipe his boots before entering the cabin, so as not to track in mud. The surprising gentleness in his voice when he read aloud from one of the few books he owned, a battered copy of Robinson Crusoe that Thomas loved. One evening in late September, after Thomas and Mary had gone to bed behind their curtain, Colton asked Natalie to step outside with him. She followed, curious and slightly nervous. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky in vast profusion. Natalie had never seen so many stars. In Las Lunas, there had been too much dust and too much light from the buildings. Here, the heavens seemed close enough to touch. "I wanted to give you something," Colton said, reaching into his pocket. "I have been working on it for a while now, but I only just finished." He placed something in her hand, and Natalie gasped. It was a comb, carved from what looked like antler or bone, smooth and polished. But it was the decoration that made her heart stutter. Tiny flowers had been carved into the handle, so delicate and detailed they seemed almost real. Each petal was perfect, each leaf distinct. "Colton, this is beautiful," she breathed. "Did you make this?" "I did. I am not much for idle hands, and carving helps pass the time in winter. I thought you might like it." Natalie ran her fingers over the carved flowers, barely able to believe she was holding something so lovely. "I have never owned anything this beautiful," she whispered. "Never in my whole life." She looked up at Colton and was startled by the intensity in his eyes. "You should have beautiful things, Natalie. You should have everything beautiful." Something in his tone made her breath catch. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she stood there in the starlight, holding the comb, feeling as if the world had tilted on its axis. "Thank you," she finally managed. "I will treasure this." Over the following weeks, Colton gave her more gifts: a necklace made from polished stones strung on sinew, a pair of soft leather gloves lined with rabbit fur, a small mirror framed in carved wood. Each gift was more beautiful than the last, and each time Natalie protested that it was too much, Colton would simply shake his head. "I have more furs and gold than I know what to do with," he told her. "Let me spend them on something that matters. Something that matters." Was that what she was to him? Natalie was afraid to examine the question too closely, afraid of what she might find. She knew she was developing feelings for Colton that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. She found herself thinking about him constantly, wondering what he was doing when he was away, looking forward to his return with an eagerness that had nothing to do with duty. But surely he did not feel the same way. Why would he? She was just a poor, uneducated woman he had hired to keep his house. The gifts were kindness, nothing more. Surely. One afternoon in early October, Colton came back from his trap lines earlier than usual. Natalie was outside, hanging laundry on the line they had strung between two trees. She had pinned up her hair with the carved comb, and she wore the necklace of polished stones over her dress. The leather gloves were tucked into her apron pocket. "You are wearing them," Colton said, his voice carrying a note of pleasure. Natalie turned, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I hope that is all right. I know they are probably meant for special occasions, but I thought, well, I wanted to enjoy them." "They are meant to be worn," Colton said, moving closer. "They are meant to be enjoyed, though I have to say they look far better on you than I ever imagined they would." He was standing very close now, close enough that Natalie could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Natalie," he said softly, "I need to tell you something. I brought you here under the pretense of needing a housekeeper, and that was true as far as it went. But it was not the whole truth." "What is the whole truth?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "The truth is that I have been alone for so long, I had forgotten what it was like to want anything beyond basic survival. But the moment I saw you in that alley, something woke up inside me. I wanted to know you. I wanted to help you. I wanted to see you smile. And now that you are here, now that I have spent these months watching you transform from someone beaten down by life into someone who laughs and hums while she works and looks at the mountains like they are the most wonderful things in the world, I find that I want so much more." "What do you want?" Natalie asked, though she thought she already knew, hoped she knew. "I want you to stay," Colton said. "Not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. I want to give you beautiful things every day for the rest of your life. I want to watch you discover joy in all the small moments you have been denied. I want to protect you and care for you and love you if you will let me." Natalie felt tears spring to her eyes. "You want to marry me?" "I do. I know I am just a rough mountain man without much polish or education. I know I am older than you by almost 8 years. But I swear to you, Natalie, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. You will never go hungry again. You will never be cold or afraid or desperate. I will build you whatever life you want, here in the mountains or back in town if you prefer. Just say you will be mine." "Yes," Natalie said, the word coming out in a rush. "Yes, Colton, I will marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached for her carefully, as if afraid she might change her mind, and pulled her into his arms. Natalie went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and breathing in his scent of pine and wood smoke and something uniquely him. "I have never done this before," she confessed, her voice muffled against his shirt. Neither have I, Colton admitted. We will figure it out together. He tilted her face up and kissed her, gently at first, then with increasing passion as Natalie responded. It was her first kiss, and it felt like coming home to a place she had been searching for her entire life without knowing it. They were married 3 weeks later by a traveling preacher who made a circuit through the remote mountain communities. Frank, Colton's neighbor, served as witness, along with his wife Sarah, a kind woman who immediately took Natalie under her wing and promised to visit often so Natalie would have female company. The wedding was simple, held in the meadow outside the cabin with the mountains as backdrop. But Natalie felt like a queen. Colton had given her a dress, not new but made of soft blue wool with only a few patches, and he had woven wildflowers into her hair along with the carved comb. Thomas and Mary stood beside her, both of them smiling so wide it looked like their faces might split. That night, after Thomas and Mary had been settled in the small addition Colton had built onto the cabin over the past weeks, giving the newlyweds privacy, Colton led Natalie to their bed. He was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when they came together finally, Natalie understood for the first time what it meant to belong to someone, and to have them belong to you in return. Winter came to the mountains with a vengeance that year. Snow fell in heavy blankets, transforming the landscape into a white wilderness. Colton had prepared well, though, and they had plenty of firewood, plenty of food. The cabin stayed warm and cozy even as the wind howled outside. Thomas thrived under Colton's tutelage, learning to be a skilled trapper and woodsman. Mary discovered a talent for tanning hides and creating beautiful crafts from leather and beads. And Natalie learned what it was like to be truly happy. Colton showed her more treasures as winter deepened. He had a collection of beautiful stones he had gathered over the years, agates and quartz crystals and pieces of turquoise. He let her look through them all, picking out her favorites, which he then fashioned into jewelry for her. He carved her more combs, each one different, each one beautiful. He made her a music box from wood and metal, its mechanism salvaged from a broken watch, that played a simple melody when wound. But the greatest treasure he gave her was not something she could hold in her hands. It was the treasure of being seen, truly seen for who she was. Of being valued not for what she could do or provide, but simply for existing. Of being loved without condition or reservation. "Why do you give me so many gifts?" she asked him one night as they lay in bed, listening to the fire crackle. "Because I can," Colton said simply. "Because for 8 years I had no one to give anything to, and now I have you. Because every time I see your face light up when I give you something beautiful, it makes me happier than anything I have ever done for myself. Because you deserve beauty, Natalie. You deserve all the beauty in the world." Natalie pressed closer to him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "You have given me more than beautiful things," she said softly. "You have given me a life worth living. You have given me hope and safety and love. Those are the real treasures." "Then we have given each other treasures," Colton said, kissing the top of her head. "Because you have given me the same." Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, revealing the meadow once more, and wildflowers began to bloom in impossible profusion. Natalie discovered she was pregnant in late April, and Colton's joy was so profound and pure it brought tears to her eyes. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Natalie asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Colton said, dropping to his knees and pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "I thought I would spend my life alone. I had made peace with it, or so I thought. And now look at us. A wife, a family, a baby on the way. I have more than I ever dreamed possible." The baby was born in January of 1880, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's delicate features. They named him Samuel, after Colton's father. Thomas and Mary, now 15 and 17, doted on their nephew with fierce devotion. Natalie had worried about the birth, having heard horror stories from other women in Las Lunas about the dangers and pain. But Sarah came to stay with them for the last month of her pregnancy and through the birth, and her calm competence made all the difference. And Colton never left her side, holding her hand through the contractions, murmuring encouragement. Looking at her with such love and admiration, it gave her strength. When Samuel was finally placed in her arms, red-faced and squalling, Natalie understood for the first time the full depth of her transformation. 2 years ago, she had been a desperate woman in an alley, clutching a bag of flour and wondering how she would survive another day. Now she was a wife, a mother, surrounded by love and beauty and hope. "He is perfect," Colton whispered, stroking one finger down Samuel's tiny cheek. "You are perfect. Our whole life is perfect." It is it not?" Natalie said wonderingly. "I did not know life could be like this." The years that followed were full and rich. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Alina in 1882 and another son, Michael, in 1884. The cabin was expanded again and again to accommodate the growing family. Thomas eventually married the daughter of a rancher who lived 20 miles south and built his own cabin nearby. Mary met a young man from Santa Fe who was surveying the territory for the railroad, and though Natalie was sad to see her go when they married, she was happy her sister had found love. Through it all, Colton continued to give Natalie treasures. He never stopped looking for beautiful things to bring her. A bolt of silk ribbon from a trader passing through, a set of china teacups, delicate and painted with roses. A rocking chair he carved himself, smooth and perfect, where she could sit and nurse their babies while looking out at the mountains. But he also gave her the treasure of his time, his attention, his unwavering devotion. He never took her for granted, never stopped courting her even after years of marriage. He told her he loved her every day. He listened when she talked, valued her opinions, treated her as an equal partner in building their life together. And Natalie gave him treasures too. She gave him the treasure of a warm, welcoming home, the treasure of children who adored him, the treasure of her laughter, her affection, her body and heart and soul. She gave him the treasure of being needed and wanted, of mattering to someone in a deep and fundamental way. One evening in the summer of 1890, they sat on the porch Colton had built the previous year, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Samuel, now 10 years old, was teaching his younger siblings to skip stones in the creek. Alina's laughter drifted up to them, clear and joyful. "You remember the day we met?" Colton asked, taking Natalie's hand in his. "Every detail," Natalie said. "I remember thinking you were the largest man I had ever seen and wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life trusting you." Colton chuckled. "And now I know it was the best decision I ever made. You saved my life that day, Colton. You saved all of us." "You saved mine too," Colton said seriously. "I did not realize how empty my life had become until I had you to fill it. I was existing, surviving, but not truly living. You taught me how to live again." Natalie leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, as reliable as the mountains themselves. "We saved each other then. That we did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Natalie thought about the girl she had been in that alley in Las Lunas, desperate and afraid and worn down by endless struggle. That girl had never owned anything beautiful, had never even dared to dream of a life like this one. But she was not that girl anymore. She was Natalie Prescott, wife of Colton, mother of 3, and the owner of more treasures than she could count. Some of those treasures were material, the gifts Colton had given her over the years, each one a symbol of his love. But the greatest treasures were the intangible ones. The treasure of waking up each morning in a warm bed beside a man who loved her. The treasure of her children's laughter. The treasure of knowing she was safe, valued, cherished. The treasure of love itself, freely given and freely returned. "What are you thinking about?" Colton asked softly. "Treasures," Natalie said. "All the treasures you have given me over the years." "I hope I have given you enough," Colton said with a smile. Natalie turned to look at him, this mountain man with his long hair and rough hands and gentle heart. "You have given me everything," she said. "Everything I never knew I needed. Everything I never dared to hope for. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams." Colton pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Then I have succeeded in my life's ambition. All I ever wanted was to make you happy, Natalie. From that first moment in the alley, all I wanted was to see you smile." "I smile every day now," Natalie said. "Because of you, because of the life we have built together." The sun sank lower, bathing the meadow in golden light. Samuel called out that they had caught a fish for dinner, and Alina shrieked with delight. Michael came running up to the porch, demanding that his father come see how far he could throw a stone. Colton stood, offering his hand to Natalie. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Together they walked down to the creek to join their children, and Natalie felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. For this place, for this family, for this man who had seen her at her lowest point and decided she was worth saving, who had given her treasures and his heart too. As autumn arrived again, painting the mountains in shades of amber and scarlet, Natalie and Colton celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Frank and Sarah came over with their children for a celebration dinner. Thomas rode up with his wife and their new baby daughter. Even Mary made the long journey from Santa Fe with her husband, bringing their 2 sons. The cabin was full to bursting with people and noise and laughter. Natalie cooked for days in preparation, making all of Colton's favorite dishes. The men sat outside smoking pipes and talking about hunting and trapping. The women gathered in the kitchen, sharing stories and gossip. The children ran wild through the meadow, playing games and getting thoroughly dirty. After dinner, as the adults sat around talking and the children finally began to wind down, Colton stood and cleared his throat. The room fell quiet. "I am not much for speeches," he began, "but I wanted to say something. 10 years ago, I made the best decision of my life. I met a woman in an alley in Las Lunas, and I saw in her eyes something that called to me. I saw strength and determination and a refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. I saw someone worth knowing, worth helping, worth loving." He turned to look at Natalie, his eyes soft with emotion. "Natalie, you have made these 10 years the happiest of my life. You have given me a home, a family, a purpose. You have filled my days with joy and my nights with peace. Every morning I wake up and cannot quite believe my good fortune, that I get to spend another day with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I know I have given you many gifts over the years, but this one is special. This one took me almost a year to make, working on it in secret whenever you were not looking." He opened the box, and Natalie gasped. Inside was a ring, but not just any ring. It was made of gold formed into the shape of entwined vines, with tiny flowers carved in such detail they looked real. Set among the flowers were small gemstones, turquoise and garnet, and even a tiny diamond. "I made it from gold I panned from the creek," Colton explained. The stones are ones we found together over the years, do you remember? I had a jeweler in Santa Fe help me with the setting, but the design is mine. It is meant to represent our life together. The vines are us, intertwined and growing together. The flowers are the beauty we have found in everyday moments. The stones are the treasures we have collected, both material and otherwise. With trembling hands, he slipped the ring onto Natalie's finger, next to the simple silver band he had given her on their wedding day. I love you, Natalie Prescott. More today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today. You are my treasure, the greatest one I have ever found or ever will find. Natalie could not speak past the lump in her throat. She threw her arms around Colton's neck, not caring that everyone was watching. I love you too, she managed to say. So much. You are my treasure too, Colton. You and this life we have built. I would not trade it for anything in the world. The room erupted in applause and happy exclamations. Sarah was dabbing at her eyes with her apron. Frank clapped Colton on the back so hard he nearly knocked him over. The children demanded to see the ring, clustering around to examine it closely. Later that night, after all the guests had gone home or settled down to sleep in various corners of the expanded cabin, Natalie and Colton lay in their bed. Natalie kept holding up her hand, watching the firelight catch on the ring, making the gold glow and the stones sparkle. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, she whispered. You say that about everything I give you, Colton teased gently, because it is always true. Everything you give me becomes the most beautiful thing because it comes from you, because it represents your love. Colton pulled her close. Do you ever think about that day in the alley? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had walked past, if I had not stopped? Sometimes, Natalie admitted, and it terrifies me. We would have lost everything. Thomas would have gone to jail. Mary and I would have had to make impossible choices to survive. We might not have survived at all. But I did stop, Colton said firmly. I did help, and now look at us. A decade of happiness, 3 beautiful children, a life full of love and meaning. That is what matters, not what might have been. You are right, Natalie said. We cannot live in the past or worry about alternative outcomes. All we can do is be grateful for the present we have. She turned to face him, running her fingers through his hair, still long though now threaded with gray. His beard was graying too, making him look distinguished rather than just wild. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there when they met, marks of years spent squinting against sun and snow. But he was still the strongest man she knew, still capable of splitting a cord of wood or carrying a full-grown buck across his shoulders. I am grateful, she said softly. For you, for our children, for this life. I am grateful for every treasure you have given me. But mostly I am grateful for your heart, Colton. That is the real treasure, not the things you make or find, but the love you give so freely. My heart has been yours from the beginning, Colton said. It always will be. They made love slowly, tenderly, with the familiarity of long partnership and the passion of deep connection. Afterward, as they drifted toward sleep, Natalie thought about how far she had come. From a desperate girl who had never owned anything beautiful, to a woman rich in every way that mattered. The treasures Colton had given her over the years filled her life. Beautiful things, practical things, things made with love and care. But the greatest treasure was the man himself, and the life they had built together in these mountains. As winter settled in once more, blanketing the world in white, Natalie stood at the window one morning and watched Colton teaching Samuel how to check the trap lines. Alina and Michael were building a snow fort near the cabin. Inside, bread was rising by the fire, filling the air with its yeasty scent. Dinner was planned, a venison stew with vegetables from their root cellar. Later, they would read together by the fire, The children clustered around while Colton brought some adventure story to life with his deep voice. It was an ordinary day, like countless others. There was nothing particularly special about it. Yet Natalie felt her heart swell with joy so intense it was almost painful. This was what Colton had given her. Not just beautiful objects, though those were lovely, but a beautiful life. Days filled with purpose and love. Nights filled with warmth and security. The knowledge that she was valued, cherished, protected. The freedom to laugh without worrying if there would be food tomorrow. The luxury of hope, of planning for the future instead of just surviving the present. She heard Colton's voice outside, praising Samuel for something he had done correctly. Heard her son's pleased response. Heard Alina shriek as Michael apparently landed a snowball on target. All the ordinary sounds of a family living their lives. Beautiful sounds. Beautiful moments. A beautiful life. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Colton reached over and took her hand. It was such a casual gesture, done without thought, the natural action of a man who loved his wife and wanted to touch her. But Natalie felt it deep in her soul. This connection, this bond between them. It had started with desperation and chance, but it had grown into something solid and enduring, tested by years and strengthened by shared joys and challenges. "Tell us a story, Pa," Michael demanded. "Tell us about the time you fought the bear." Colton laughed. "I've told you that story 100 times. But we like it," Alina insisted. So Colton launched into the familiar tale, embellishing it slightly for dramatic effect, making the children gasp and giggle in all the right places. Natalie watched him, this mountain man who had given her everything, and felt such love it almost overwhelmed her. Later, after the children were in bed, they sat together by the fire. Colton was carving, working on a new comb for Natalie. She was mending one of Michael's shirts, torn during the day's play. It was quiet, peaceful, perfect. "What are you making?" Natalie asked, watching his hands move with practiced skill. "Another comb. I thought I would carve birds into this one." "You like the flowers so much, I thought you might like birds too." "I will love it," Natalie said with certainty. "I love everything you make for me." "Good," Colton said, smiling. "Because I do not plan to stop. I will keep making you beautiful things until the day I die, Natalie. It is what I do. It is how I show you what I feel but cannot always find the words to express." "You do fine with words," Natalie assured him. "But I understand. The gifts are a language all their own. They say I see you, I value you, I want to bring you joy. And they do bring me joy, Colton. Every single one of them." She set down her mending and moved to sit beside him. He put down his carving and wrapped his arm around her, pulling her against his side. She fit perfectly there, as she always had, as she always would. "You ever regret marrying me?" Colton asked quietly. "Do you ever wish you had married someone refined, educated, someone who could give you a life in town with society and culture?" "Never," Natalie said fiercely. "Not once. Not for a single moment. You are everything I could ever want or need. This life is everything I could ever want or need. I do not want society or culture. I want mountains and meadows and my family around me. I want you, Colton, only and always you." He kissed the top of her head. "I am a lucky man." "We are both lucky," Natalie corrected. "We found each other when we both needed finding. We saved each other. We built something beautiful together." The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again, gentle and steady. The cabin was warm, secure, a haven against the cold. And Natalie was filled with such contentment, such peace. She could hardly believe this was her life. Years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Samuel grew into a young man much like his father, strong and capable and kind. He took over more and more of the trapping business, allowing Colton to slow down slightly as age began to catch up with him. Elinor proved to have a gift for healing, learning from Sarah, and eventually becoming the person people came to when they were sick or injured. Michael followed in Thomas's footsteps, becoming an expert woodsman and guide, often leading hunting parties for wealthy men who came out from the east. Colton and Natalie grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents. Their cabin became a gathering place for the family, a center of warmth and love that drew people in. Through it all, Colton never stopped giving Natalie treasures. Even when his hands grew stiff with arthritis and carving became difficult, he still found ways to bring her beautiful things. A particular stone from the creek, a feather from a rare bird, wildflowers picked from the meadow. Each gift was given with the same love as the first carved comb all those years ago, and Natalie treasured every single one, not for their material value, but for what they represented. Love given freely and constantly. A man who never tired of trying to make his wife happy. A partnership that had endured through decades and come out stronger. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration that drew people from miles around. Natalie and Colton sat at the head of the table, silver-haired and weathered but still holding hands, still looking at each other with the same love that had brought them together. Thomas stood to give a toast. "To my sister and the man who saved us all," he said, raising his glass. "When I was a foolish boy who made a terrible mistake, you gave us a second chance. You gave us a home, a life, a future. You showed me what it means to be a good man, Colton. And Natalie, you showed me what it means to be strong, to never give up, to always take care of the people you love. I would not be the man I am today without both of you." The sentiment was echoed by Mary, by Samuel and Elinor and Michael, by grandchildren and in-laws and friends. Each person shared what Colton and Natalie had meant to them, how their love and generosity had touched lives in ways large and small. When it was finally Natalie's turn to speak, she stood slowly, leaning on Colton's arm. The room fell silent. "40 years ago," she began, "I was a desperate woman in an alley, holding a sack of flour and wondering how I would survive another day. I had never owned anything beautiful in my life. I had never known real kindness. I had never dared to hope for anything beyond the basic necessities of survival." She looked at Colton, her eyes shining with tears. "And then this man, this wonderful, impossible man, walked into my life and changed everything. He gave me treasures, beautiful things I had never dreamed of owning. But more than that, he gave me his heart. He gave me love and security and hope. He gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." She turned to address the room. "I want you all to know that every day for the past 40 years, I have woken up grateful. Grateful for this man, for our children, for the life we have built together. I have been blessed beyond measure. I have known love in its truest form, and I hope that all of you find what I found. A partner who sees you, truly sees you, and loves what they see. Someone who brings you treasures, not just material ones, but the treasures of kindness and devotion and steadfast loyalty." She sat down to thunderous applause, wiping her eyes. Colton pulled her close, murmuring in her ear words meant only for her. "You are the treasure, Natalie. You always have been. Everything I gave you was just a reflection of what you gave me." As the celebration continued around them, as their family laughed and talked and enjoyed being together, Natalie reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From poverty and desperation to prosperity and joy, from loneliness to belonging, from a life devoid of beauty to a life overflowing with it. She thought about all the treasures Colton had given her over the years. The carved combs and the jewelry and the beautiful objects that still filled their home. Each one was precious, each one told a story. But the real treasure was sitting beside her, his hand warm in hers, his presence solid and reassuring. The real treasure was the love they had built, the life they had created, the family they had raised. The real treasure was the knowledge that she was loved completely, unconditionally, permanently. The real treasure was him. As evening fell and the guests began to leave, as the cabin slowly emptied and quieted, Colton led Natalie outside to their favorite spot overlooking the meadow. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. They stood together in silence, watching the light change and fade. "You remember the first time we watched a sunset together?" Colton asked softly. "Of course. You told me the mountains were beautiful, and I said I had never seen beautiful country before. And look at us now. 40 years of watching sunsets together." "And I hope for many more," Natalie said. "As do I," Colton agreed. "Though I know we are not young anymore, the years catch up with all of us eventually." "They do," Natalie acknowledged. "But I have no regrets, Colton, not one. Whatever years we have left, we will spend them together, just as we have spent the last 40. And when our time comes, whenever that may be, I will go knowing I lived a life full of love and beauty. Thanks to you." Colton pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the stars began to emerge overhead. "You gave me just as much, Natalie. You taught me how to love again, how to trust, how to build a life worth living. You took a lonely mountain man and made him part of a family. You took my heart, which I thought was too damaged to ever love again, and healed it. You are my miracle." They stood together as darkness fell completely, wrapped in each other's arms, warmed by each other's presence. Around them, the mountains stood eternal. The meadow lay peaceful. The creek sang its endless song. Inside the cabin, their children and grandchildren were settling down for the night, continuing the celebration of a love that had endured through decades and would continue to endure as long as they both lived. Natalie thought about the girl she had been, desperate and afraid in a dusty alley. That girl had known only hardship and struggle, but she had survived, and her survival had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life. She had never owned anything beautiful in her life, until a mountain man gave her treasures and his heart too. And in return, she had given him hers freely and completely, creating between them something more precious than gold, more lasting than any carved trinket or piece of jewelry. They had created love, true and enduring. They had created family, strong and supportive. They had created a life together that was beautiful in every sense of the word. And as they stood there under the stars, Natalie knew with absolute certainty that she was the richest woman in the world. Not in material wealth, though they had enough of that, but in the wealth that truly mattered. The wealth of being loved and loving in return. The wealth of a life well lived. The wealth of treasures that could never be lost or stolen or diminished. The wealth of a heart freely given and gratefully received. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Colton responded. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." And that, Natalie thought with deep contentment, was the greatest treasure of all.